What did you say, brother?
Husks.
Husk. It wasn't. Yeah. In verse 14 it says, and when he had spent all, there rose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Verse 15 said he went and he joined himself to a citizen of that country, which is unheard of. He's a Jew, and he joined himself to another country, and he done something that Jews done. I mean, it was way down the chart for these guys, and that's to be a feeder of hogs. His attention, his focus changed from pleasure to the basic necessities of life. I had a trucking company one time. You know my testimony. And man, I didn't say I made a lot of money, but there was a lot of money there to put your hands on. Boy, I had a time. For about 3 years. And it got down to nobody but me when the money run out. Besides me. My mom and some friends went on a trip. My dad was supposed to go, but he stayed home. Because God told him to. He said, God's telling me to stay home. There's something about Patrick this weekend. And it was the weekend, the only weekend I'd ever broke down. God set it up. Guaranteed. I spent 3 or 4 days on a binge. Just spent everything I had, the last little bit, on all the cocaine I could buy. And went up in the top of my house and upstairs room and stayed there for 3 or 4 days, and then went into a 3 or 4 day sleep and woke up with a knock on the door that I hadn't heard in a long time. It was a knock that did. From my dad. And he said, your truck's up at the shop. Your driver's quit. Left it up there. Let's go get that thing fixed and ready to go out again. Get you a driver. Dad didn't care nothing about that truck. And as we went and showed me some things that needed to be done to it, I began to take the panel off the dash, and he climbed in the passenger seat and began to talk. I was shaking so much I couldn't hold the screwdriver. And I broke down. And I came to myself. Of all the things that had my attention, I came to myself. In reality, said that I was in trouble. And I reached out for the only one who wanted to help. Now listen, in verse 17 it says, now all this time that he'd been thinking of necessity, and he's in the hog pen, and he's filled that trough up with all this food, and he's sitting there thinking, and he's hungry. And his mind begins to think. And he says, man, you know these hogs have more to eat than I do? And probably the lowest state he's ever been in his life is when he actually thought about eating with the hogs. That had his attention. Probably the only time in his whole life that he thought about eating with the hogs. Some may say he hit his rock bottom. But then God planted another thought in his mind. He said, you know what? Why would I do this when I could go back to my father's house and beg for his forgiveness and just And then a plan began to form. You ever start thinking that? Once you get that thought in your mind and that plan, you start coming up with that next plan. And just so you got a plan, you begin to get motivation and determination. And he began to go out and exercise that plan. He was going to go back and he was going to fall on his knees and he was going to beg that his father forgive him for what he did. And Father, if you would just hire me on as a servant, and you know these servants have food to spare. He began to play out that plan. Did you ever notice how you got a plan and you just start in motion, and really that plan is just to get, Jesus is just trying to get your feet moving to get you to the next spot. My daddy set in a plan, and on the way he was taking me to rehab, and he had called in all these favors and all. You don't just normally give somebody in rehab in one day. But God began to open that up. Now listen, on the way I started thinking, we stopped by a gas station and I bought a book, and it's all these boats you could buy and stuff. And I found this big old boat you could buy for like $10,000. And you know what I was going to do? I was going to be a bartender. And all the way from Jay, from the shop up there to Navarre, I had come up with this plan that I was going to be I could go to school and be a bartender, and I could live on that boat. I just need motivation. I'm dang sure glad that plan didn't work. God just needed to get me from Jay to Navarre. And as I entered into that place, I had never been so happy to be in a place like that. Now listen to me. As he got to his father's place and he's preparing what he's going to say. You know how you rehearse what you're going to say right before you say it, so it to come out right, and you're trying to now get an approval, you know, so you got to say it right, you know. And he's preparing what he's going to say, and he's, Father, I've been Father, forgive me, and then his father, a whole different reaction happens than he expected. He expected his father to come out and say, I told you so. You should have listened to me. You should have. But his father didn't do that. Because Jesus was preparing the way. His father ran and met him. Kissed him on the neck. Put the best robe on he had in the house. Put a ring on his finger just to make him feel better about who he was. Shoes on his feet. And he stunk like a hog. But he didn't care. He didn't care. He said, kill the fatted cow. And the son began to say, Father, I've sinned. And he was getting to that part where he says, Father, hire me on as your servant. But he never could get there because his father cut him off. His plan wasn't no good. You know why his plan wasn't no good? Because Jesus had another plan. Kill the fatted calf and let's eat and drink and be merry. For you were lost, but now you're found. Now, you know what really gets to me is he wasn't physically lost. He left from that very spot that he's standing. And if his father ever wanted to find him, he could. I guarantee you. All you had to go is where somebody was spending a lot of money. You could know. But listen to this. He was spiritually lost. His father didn't go try to find him because he wasn't himself. If his father would have went a day early, it wouldn't have worked. Because he wasn't, his attention was on that righteous living and the money that was his and all of this stuff, so it wouldn't have worked. Just as my daddy couldn't come a day early because I was asleep. But when he came, I was awake. I got into that rehab room, my room, the detox room. I told you this 1,000 times, and it will never change. I knelt down beside God and said, Jesus, I will go anywhere. Now listen to this now. Just an hour earlier, I was going to be a bartender in Bible. But I kneeled down and I said, Jesus, you've been chasing me a long time. From 16 years old, you've been calling me to be a pastor. Not a truck driver, not a truck owner, not a bartender, not a boat owner, but a pastor. I said, Jesus, I'll do anything and I'll go anywhere you go. One time, one important time in my life, Jesus had my full attention. I wasn't going to church and living in the world. I wasn't trying to be saved and lost. Jesus had my full attention. Like it said in verse 17, it says, and when he came to himself, when he's no longer lost but found, when reality made sense, when only what was really important is what he desired, is when he came to himself. When you find Jesus, the world will make sense. Life will truly begin. Righteous living will sing righteous living. Here's the thing. There's nobody, I don't care where you are in your life today. I don't care where you are financially or career-wise or family-wise. This is one thing I can stand up here and say to all people is Jesus wants your full attention. He wants you to love Him. The creation, the cross, the grave, the ascension, the throne, to the coming back, to the mansion on high, for eternal grateful. I love you. Every head bowed, every eyes closed.